"You're not invited to Christmas this year," my mom snapped. "Fine," I replied, quietly transferring the $12,000 holiday fund I sent her back into my account and canceling the chalet reservation in her name. By evening, I had 27 missed calls and one message that made me laugh out loud. I, 32M, stared at my phone screen, reading the text message for the third time. The words hadn't changed. My mother had just uninvited me from Christmas, the holiday I'd been funding for the past 5 years. The message was short, cold, and typical of how things had been going lately. She told me not to bother showing up this year because my younger brother and his wife needed the space for their kids. Apparently, the chalet I'd reserved and paid for wasn't big enough for everyone, and I was the obvious choice to cut. I sat there in my office, the city lights of downtown reflecting off the windows of my corner suite. 5 years ago, when I'd landed this corporate job with its ridiculous salary, I'd made a promise to myself. I'd take care of my family. I'd make sure Mom had the Christmas she always dreamed about, but could never afford when we were growing up. So every year, I'd wire her $12,000 in November. She'd book a luxury chalet in Vermont, stock it with food and gifts, and host the entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone showed up for the free vacation. And every year, I'd arrive to find myself sleeping on a pull-out couch while others got the master bedrooms, helping with dishes while my brother held court in the living room, and generally being treated like the ATM I'd apparently become. But this year was different. This year, she didn't even want the ATM present. I opened my banking app and found the transfer I'd made 2 weeks ago. $12,000, sent to Mom's account with the memo Christmas 2024. My finger hovered over the screen for maybe 10 seconds before I initiated the reversal. The money would be back in my account within 3 business days. Then I pulled up my email and found the confirmation for the chalet reservation. It was in Mom's name, as always, but my card was on file. I called the rental company and explained I needed to cancel. The woman on the phone was apologetic but firm. Their cancellation policy meant I'd lose the deposit, about $2,000. I told her that was fine and confirmed the cancellation. The whole process took less than 15 minutes. I set my phone face down on my desk and returned to the contract I'd been reviewing. My hands were steady. I felt calm, almost relieved. For 5 years, I'd been trying to buy my way into feeling like part of my own family. Now I was free. My phone started buzzing an hour later. I ignored the first call from Mom, then the second. By the 5th call, I switched my phone to silent and kept working. I had a major presentation the next morning, and I needed to focus. When I finally checked my phone at 7 that evening, I had 27 missed calls. Most were from Mom, but there were also several from my brother, 2 from my aunt, and even 1 from my cousin who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The voicemails were predictable. Mom's first message was confused. The rental company had called her about the cancellation, and there must have been some mistake. The second was angry. How dare I cancel their Christmas plans without discussing it with her first? The third was panicked. She'd already invited everyone, and now she looked foolish. My brother's voicemail was more direct. He called me selfish and immature, said I was throwing a tantrum like a child. He reminded me that family was supposed to support each other, not pull the rug out over a simple misunderstanding. I deleted all the voicemails without listening to them completely. But then I saw the text message, and I couldn't help but laugh. It was from Mom, sent about an hour ago. She told me she'd talked to my brother, and they'd decided I could come to Christmas after all. They'd make room for me somehow. She'd even let me have one of the actual bedrooms this year instead of the couch. All I needed to do was send the money back and rebook the chalet. She'd already sent me links to 3 available properties, all in the same price range. The audacity was almost impressive. I texted back a single word. No? My phone immediately started ringing again. I declined the call and turned off my phone entirely. Update 1. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone had been burning up overnight. 53 missed calls. 48 text messages. Even my email inbox had several messages from family members I'd barely seen since childhood. The texts followed a pattern. First confusion, then anger, then attempts at guilt tripping, and finally bargaining. Mom offered to let me have the master bedroom. My brother suggested we could split the cost this year. He'd contribute $2,000 if I covered the rest. My aunt sent a long message about family obligations and how disappointed my late father would be in me. That last one stung, but not enough to change my mind. I responded to Mom with a longer message this time. I explained that I'd spent $60,000 over 5 years funding Christmas vacations where I was treated like an unwelcome guest. I told her that being uninvited was actually a relief because it showed me exactly where I stood. I said I'd be spending Christmas by myself this year, and I was looking forward to it. Her response came within seconds. She insisted I was being dramatic and taking things out of context. The text about not coming to Christmas was just her being stressed. She hadn't really meant it. I was her son, and of course I was always invited. I didn't reply. Work became my refuge that week. I threw myself into projects, stayed late at the office, and volunteered for assignments no one else wanted. My colleagues probably thought I was gunning for another promotion, but really, I just didn't want to go home to an empty apartment and think about the upcoming holidays. My phone kept buzzing with calls and messages from various family members. I responded to none of them. The silence from my end seemed to escalate their panic. By the end of the week, the tone of the messages had shifted dramatically. Now they were trying different tactics. My brother sent a message saying his kids were asking about Uncle and would be devastated if I didn't come to Christmas. My aunt forwarded a photo from last year's celebration with a caption about precious family memories. Mom left a voicemail where she was actually crying. She said she didn't understand why I was being so cruel, that she'd apologized for the misunderstanding, and all she wanted was her family together for Christmas. But the thing was, she hadn't apologized. Not really. She'd explained, justified, and rationalized. She'd insisted I was overreacting. But she'd never actually said she was sorry for uninviting me or for the 5 years of taking my money while treating me like an afterthought. On Saturday, my brother showed up at my apartment. I didn't let him in. We talked through the doorway, me standing in my entryway while he stood in the hall. He looked tired and frustrated. He asked what it would take to fix this situation. He said Mom was making everyone miserable with her stress about the ruined Christmas plans. I told him the situation was already fixed. I wasn't funding their vacation anymore, and I wouldn't be attending. They were free to make their own arrangements. He asked if this was really about the one text message. I told him it was about 5 years of being treated like a checkbook with legs. He didn't have a response to that. Before he left, he said something that stuck with me. He told me I was breaking Mom's heart. And for what? Pride? Money? He said at the end of the day, we were still family, and family forgave each other. I asked him if family also respected each other. He didn't answer. Update 2. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it alone in my apartment with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine. My phone was silent for the first time in weeks. Apparently, the family had gathered at my aunt's house for Thanksgiving, and no one had thought to invite me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I got an email from Mom. It was long and rambling, filled with memories from my childhood. She talked about the Christmases when Dad was still alive, when money was tight, but we were happy. She reminisced about the year I'd saved up my allowance to buy her a necklace at the mall, how touched she'd been by the gesture. Then she pivoted to talking about how hard things had been after Dad died, how she'd struggled to keep the family together and provide for us. She said she'd always been proud of my success, of how I'd made something of myself. She said she'd never asked me to fund the Christmas vacations I'd offered, insisted even. She'd only accepted because she thought it made me happy to give. The email ended with a plea. She asked me to reconsider, to remember that family was all we had in this world. She said Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without me there. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop without responding. The truth was more complicated than she wanted to acknowledge. Yes, I'd offered to fund the first Christmas vacation, but that was after she'd spent an entire dinner complaining about how she wished she could give everyone a nice holiday, but couldn't afford it on her fixed income. I'd been making good money for the first time in my life, and I'd wanted to help. I'd wanted to be the hero. But somewhere along the way, my generosity had become an expectation. The thank yous had stopped. The gratitude had faded, and I'd been too afraid of rocking the boat to say anything about it. Until now. 2 weeks before Christmas, my cousin called me. She was the one family member I'd actually liked spending time with, before distance and busy lives had pulled us apart. We talked for almost an hour. She told me the family was in chaos. Mom had tried to organize a scaled-down Christmas at her house, but it wasn't going well. People were arguing about who should contribute money, who should host, who should do the cooking. Apparently, when I'd been funding everything, I'd also been the neutral party that kept everyone's egos in check. She asked me if I was really planning to spend Christmas alone. I told her I was, and I was fine with it. She said that sounded lonely. I said it sounded peaceful. Before we hung up, she said something that surprised me. She told me she didn't blame me for stepping back. She said she'd watched over the years as I'd been taken for granted, and she'd wondered when I'd finally had enough. She said she hoped I'd find a way to be happy, whether that included the family or not. It was the first conversation I'd had about this situation where someone actually listened instead of trying to fix things or convince me I was wrong. 3 days before Christmas, I was working late at the office when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer. It was Dad's brother, my uncle. I hadn't seen him in years. He'd had a falling out with Mom ages ago over something I'd never fully understood. We'd exchanged Christmas cards, but nothing more. He told me he'd heard about the situation from my cousin. He said he wasn't calling to take sides or get involved in family drama. He just wanted me to know that if I wanted company on Christmas, his door was open. He lived upstate with his wife, just the two of them since their kids had moved away. No pressure, no expectations, just an offer. I surprised myself by accepting. Christmas Eve, I drove 3 hours north to my uncle's house. It was a small ranch-style place on 2 acres of land, covered in snow. His wife answered the door with a warm hug and ushered me inside where it smelled like cookies and coffee. We spent Christmas Day eating too much food, watching old movies, and talking about everything except the family drama. They asked about my job, my hobbies, what I'd been reading. They treated me like a person, not a problem to be solved or a resource to be tapped. On Christmas night, sitting by their fireplace with a glass of whiskey, my uncle asked me what I planned to do moving forward. I told him I honestly didn't know. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. He told me something then that I needed to hear. He said that family wasn't just about blood. It was about respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. He said the family we're born into isn't always the family we need, and there was no shame in building something different. He also said that boundaries weren't walls, they were doors. I could choose when to open them and for whom. I didn't know anyone unlimited access to my time, money, or emotional energy just because we shared DNA. I drove home on the 26th feeling lighter than I had in months. Update 3. New Year's came and went. I'd blocked most of my family's numbers by then, tired of the constant messages that swung between guilt-tripping and anger. But I left Mom's number unblocked. I wasn't sure why. She called me on January 2nd. Her voice was different this time, quieter, older somehow. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I hesitated, then agreed. We met at a diner halfway between our places. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. We ordered coffee and sat in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes. Then she started talking. She said she'd spent the holidays thinking about everything that had happened. She said my brother had hosted Christmas at his house, and it had been stressful and expensive and nothing like the celebrations I'd funded. She said people had complained, argued, and left early. She said she finally understood what I'd been trying to tell her. I waited, saying nothing. She apologized then, really apologized. She said she'd taken me for granted, that she'd gotten so used to my generosity, she'd forgotten it was a gift, not an obligation. She said the text uninviting me had been cruel and unfair, born from stress, but inexcusable nonetheless. She said she didn't expect me to forgive her immediately or at all, but she needed me to know she was sorry. I asked her why it had taken losing the money and the vacation for her to realize how she'd been treating me. She didn't have a good answer to that. We talked for 2 hours. She cried a little. I didn't. But I listened, really listened, and tried to hear what she was saying beneath the words. When we finally left the diner, I told her I needed time. I said I wasn't ready to jump back into family gatherings and obligations. I said if we were going to rebuild our relationship, it needed to be on different terms where I was valued as a person, not a bank account. She said she understood. She asked if she could call me sometimes, just to talk. I said yes. It's been 6 months now. Mom and I talk on the phone every couple of weeks. The conversations are still sometimes awkward, but they're real. She asks about my life and actually listens to the answers. She tells me about her week without segueing into requests for money or complaints about other family members. I had lunch with my cousin last month. I've exchanged a few texts with my aunt, but I haven't spoken to my brother, and I haven't attended any family gatherings. I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe I never will be. I've been using the money I would have spent on Christmas to fund other things, a vacation to Japan, a down payment on a better apartment, donations to charities that actually appreciate the support. I've been investing in myself and my own happiness instead of trying to buy acceptance from people who didn't value me. Some people might think I overreacted to one text message, but it wasn't really about the text. It was about 5 years of being invisible while everyone enjoyed the fruits of my labor. It was about finally having enough self-respect to walk away from a dynamic that was slowly destroying me. The $12,000 I took back was the best money I ever spent because it bought me my freedom and my dignity. And the message that made me laugh that first night, the one where Mom told me I could come to Christmas after all if I just sent the money back, that message sits in my phone as a reminder of what I'm not willing to accept anymore. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just refusing to participate in your own exploitation. Sometimes it's taking back your power and walking away with your head held high. I'm not sure what the future holds for my relationship with my family, but I know one thing for certain. I'll never again let anyone treat my generosity as their entitlement, and I'll never again mistake being needed for being loved.